Earlier this month, the Trump administration announced that, after a year-long Section 301 investigation, the US would be imposing a 25% tariff on most Brazilian imports. In that investigation, the first item on the list of American complaints wasn't about tariffs or trade barriers, as you might expect. Rather, it was about, quote, digital trade and electronic payment services, a reference to a payment processor called Pix that was set up by the Brazilian central bank as a cheaper alternative to companies like Visa and Mastercard. So, in this video, we're going to explain what Pix is, why Trump doesn't like it, and why he probably won't get his way. Which flag is better, Canada or Iceland? What about Japan or Mexico? Albania or Barbados? How about a battle of the dragons between Wales and Bhutan? Cast your vote in our official flag ranking survey by clicking the link in the description. So let's start by explaining what Pix actually does. In short, when you use your credit or debit card to pay for something, you're basically sending money from your bank account to the seller's bank account. This might feel like a simple, instant process when you tap your card, but that payment has to actually be facilitated by a payment processor, which acts as a trustworthy middleman between your banks. Globally, the payment processing market is dominated by two major players, Mastercard and Visa, who together account for roughly 90% of all card transactions, if you exclude China, where the market is dominated by a state-owned company called UnionPay. Now, unsurprisingly, not everyone likes this state of affairs. Not only does this mean these two companies are essentially skimming a bit off the top of every transaction and sending it back to the US, their fees can also be prohibitively expensive, especially for would-be users in poorer countries. To remedy this, a number of jurisdictions have tried to nurture homegrown alternatives. In the EU, for instance, earlier this year, 4 national payment processors came together in an attempt to create a sort of European alternative. Generally, however, these initiatives have fallen short, because the Visa-Mastercard duopoly is protected by what are known as network effects. In other words, everyone uses them because, well, everyone else already uses them, which makes them pretty convenient. However, one notable exception is Brazil, where in 2020 the Brazilian central bank introduced a new system called Pix. Before Pix, sending money in Brazil was both frustratingly slow and expensive. This was bad news for any affected businesses, but also the economy as a whole, because this pricey but inefficient system encouraged Brazilians to hold their savings in cash instead. This meant there wasn't enough money in Brazil's banking system, and encouraged a massive cash-based informal economy, which wasn't properly regulated or taxed. To remedy all this, in November 2020, the Brazilian central bank introduced a new payment processor called Pix. Pix allows Brazilians to transfer money between bank accounts quickly and cheaply. It's integrated into the mobile apps of any financial institution with over 500,000 customers. In practice, this means basically every big bank in Brazil, and allows you to send money with just a QR code. Transfers happen almost instantaneously and cost nothing for individuals. There is a fee for businesses, usually around 0.33% of the value of the transaction, but this is many times lower than the 1.13% usually charged on debit cards and 2.34% on credit cards. Pix has been incredibly successful. It now accounts for nearly half of all financial transactions in Brazil and is used by around 160 million people, or over 90% of the adult population. It's one of the very few entities that enjoys broad support across Brazil's deeply polarised politics, with opinion polls indicating that 92% of Brazilians have a positive opinion of Pix, and a couple of months ago, Colombia's then-president Gustavo Petro even asked for it to be expanded into Colombia. Pix has also been good news for Brazil's economy more generally. The central bank estimates that around 70 million people have been brought into the formal banking system for the first time via Pix, and the total volume of financial transactions has essentially doubled since Pix was introduced in 2020. Interestingly, Pix has actually led to an increase in non-Pix credit and debit card transactions, which suggests that, while Pix is gaining market share, it's also just making Brazilians more comfortable using bank services more generally. This implies that, while it is quite a direct competitor, Pix has actually been good news for other payment processors like Visa and Mastercard, because even though it's taking an ever larger slice of the payment processing pie, it's also making the overall pie a lot bigger. Nonetheless, this argument didn't fly with Visa, Mastercard, or apparently Trump's White House, which announced last week that it would be imposing a 25% tariff on most Brazilian exports to the US. This came after a year-long investigation into what the White House described as Brazil's unfair trade practices. This investigation was carried out under Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act, a relatively obscure provision that allows the White House to impose tariffs if an investigation by US trade representatives finds evidence of unfair trade practices, and which the Trump administration has had to lean on more and more since the Supreme Court ruled against Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs. Anyway, in that investigation, the first item on Trump's list of complaints was Brazil's, quote, digital trade and electronic payment services, widely interpreted as a thinly veiled reference to PIX. Unsurprisingly, this didn't go down well with Brazil's President Lula, who already has a somewhat testy relationship with Trump, and immediately came out to insist that he would protect PIX, while accusing Flavio Bolsonaro, the son of Jair Bolsonaro and Lula's main rival for the upcoming election, of trying to sell Brazil out to foreign interests. This was savvy politics from Lula's perspective. PIX is one of very few entities that enjoy broad support across Brazil's deeply polarised politics, with polls indicating that over 90% of Brazilians like the system. And Lula has been able to present himself as its defender, and by extension, a champion of Brazilian sovereignty. Conversely, it's put Flavio Bolsonaro in a tough spot. Bolsonaro is generally pretty chummy with the Trump administration, which has been actively lobbying to overturn his father's conviction for a Trump-esque attempt to overturn the last election, but has tried to delicately push back against this particular policy. At a hearing in Washington earlier this month, Bolsonaro tried to make the exact argument we made earlier, about how PIX was actually good for Visa and Mastercard because it increased the size of the payment processing pie, but he was essentially ignored by the White House. Unsurprisingly, this has been bad news for Bolsonaro, who slipped in the polls since Trump announced his new tariffs. All in all, it looks like Trump's attempt to take on PIX will be in vain. Not only has Lula made it clear he's not going to back down, even if Trump does stick to his tariffs, it also looks like, as happened with Viktor Orban in Hungary and Pierre Poilievre in Canada, Trump's meddling in a foreign election has once again backfired.
Greenland. For decades, it's been viewed as little more than a giant ice sheet on the edge of the world. A massive ice fortress that most of us only ever saw from 30,000 feet on a flight to somewhere else. However, that ice is receding, and as it does, the world's superpowers are beginning to move in. At TLDR, we've spent almost 10 years explaining things from behind a desk, but some stories are too big for our studio. So to understand why this island, and the Arctic more generally, has suddenly become the most valuable real estate on Earth, we had to go there. As you'll soon discover though, this isn't just a political briefing hosted from the cold. We're hiking through the wild, discovering melting icebergs, and uncovering the rusting remnants of secret military projects abandoned in the snow.
I used to think I understood what cold was, but I was lying to myself.
Over 3 episodes, we're asking, what's the big deal with Greenland? From the scramble for rare earth minerals, to the new battlefield for Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. We're camping out in the glaciers that are changing our climate, and discovering the country caught in the middle of this global tug-of-war.
This is funny to you, Jet.
It will be funny to you in the future.
Hello.
Hello, deep there.
Jesus Christ. There's the whale.
Right wheel.
Rather appropriately for the world's largest island, this is the biggest project we've ever taken on. A documentary about the beauty, power, and future of our planet. Coming this summer exclusively to TLDR Party members. If you're not a TLDR Party member already, you can sign up right now. Members not only get access to 2 long documentaries like this one, but they also get access to the audio versions of every article in our magazine Too Long, each narrated by the writers of those articles, allowing you to listen along to it all. You also get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, access to our extra podcasts, The Last Move and The Last Word, our brand new news quiz, plus our brand new UK politics podcast, Andemonium. Becoming a member costs £3.99 a month, but for the very best deal, you should grab the Too Long and TLDR Party bundle. That way you get both our quarterly magazine Too Long, as well as access to all of the benefits of TLDR Party, for a very discounted rate. Plus, if you use code Greenland, we'll give you an extra £4 off your first bundle payment, making it basically the same price as a standalone subscription. Find out more and support the channel at toolong.news/party.